Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Samir Aliyev. I'm the founder and CEO of Swiss Cyber Institute, and today I'm going to be your host for the next 1 hour. Today's topic is how the AI, geopolitics, and quantum developments are reshaping the security landscape. Three forces arriving at the same time, and that most security functions are still handling in three separate places in like silos. I would like to thank you for your time in the midday of the week, and you will spend next 60 minutes, let's say so, roughly, with us. And I just mentioned three topics, the wording is AI, geopolitics, and quantum, and none of these terms are new, its own. What's new is that they are now overlapping, and the overlapping is where the control gaps sits. According to World Economic Forum's Global Cybersecurity Outlook 2026 says that almost 87% of the organizations they see AI vulnerabilities increasing, and the 64% naming geopolitically motivated cyber attacks as a risk that has changed the most. And of course, quantum is the slow one, but it is there, the one that's with the longest lead time, which is exactly why it belongs in the same conversation. Now, saying that it is not a treat tool today. Mark and James, my guests, speakers today will take three concrete cases: a supply chain hit, a Q-day scenario, and AI-driven deepfake frauds, and we will finish it with what to do the first. EY Switzerland is our main partner at the Global Cyber Conference and the present partner at the Swiss Awards, and we are organizing this webinar with EY Switzerland together as a partnership and framing it as a substance. And it is a session that we will lead it to the roundtable in Zurich on 1st of September during the Global Cyber Conference. That's why this is the first step, the webinar. Then we have keynotes and the roundtables and a lot of discussion in Zurich on 1st and 2nd of September. As a housekeeping, this is a live webinar format. We are right now recording it, and it will take around 40 minutes, the presentation, and then moderated Q&A session. Please, if you have any question, use the Q&A box at any time on the bottom of your screen, and anytime you can send your questions, I will group them, then ask to Mark and James at the end. And we will share the slides and the recordings later on with you by email. When it comes to my speakers today, I'm happy to have these two gentlemen with me today because I know that you are extremely busy. But thanks a lot for your time for the next, let's say, already 55 minutes. Mark Minar, who is a partner, technology consulting, cybersecurity at the EY Switzerland. Mark is mainly working with the boards and C-suite on cyber risks, where it meets geopolitics, cybersecurity, supply chain, and regulations. I have also James Becker, Cyber Transformation Lead, Technology Consulting at EY, and James Fox on the transformational side of the business, taking AI and quantum risk from slides into the controls that actually runs. Saying that, I wouldn't take more time. Just for your information, shoot your question anytime by using Q&A box, and I'm going to take all the notes, and then I will ask to James and Mark at the end. So, Mark and James, I would like to invite you to the presentation. The floor is yours, and I will be collecting questions as you go. I think you can already start to share your slides. Let's go for it.
Good. Thank you very much. Can you see the screen? Is it shared?
Yes, we see the screen. If we
Good.
switch to on the top for our attendees, if you switch your screen on the top from webinar to Mark Winner's screen, and you will see the slides. Yeah.
Okay. Good. Let me.
I think you need to click
Just one
continue to
second.
share. Yes, perfect.
Now
Now
that's good. Okay, good. So let's start. Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar. As said by Samir, this is the opening webinar for the Global Cyber Conference 26 series. And we from EY, we are happy to kick things off today on the topic of AI, geopolitics, and quantum computing. As mentioned by Samir, over the next 30 to 40 minutes, we will walk you through three forces that are reshaping cybersecurity all at the same time, right? So that's we split it between the two of us, between James and myself. I start in the first 20 minutes giving you a broad overview, and then in the second part, James deep dives a bit more into the AI topic. As mentioned here, my name Mark Wiener, partner from EY, and James Packer, also our cyber transformation lead from EY, are here with you today. The two of us, we spend a good part of our days on exactly these three topics. So we try to also bring the real life experience we have from our clients to the table to make it as relevant as possible for you. And then, as mentioned by Samir as well, quick word on what comes next. So today we try to set a bit the theme. On the 1st of September then at the actual conference, James and myself, we will run a hands-on roundtable that turns what we talk today about into a practical exercise. You will see it in the application, in the program. We call it the risk board. It's a guided risk assessment on a sample organization and architecture. So in this section, you will do three things there. You will assess the real exposure on a sample AI architecture, find where traditional controls no longer hold, and we will then agree together, okay, what will be a good message and where to act first on an executive level. If that sounds useful to you guys, I would encourage you to register. Spots are as always limited, but I think it will be a really cool exercise. But now let's go into the content, and maybe here a quick note before we get into the numbers. Many of these numbers here on this on the next slide as well are from the WEF. They came out with the Global Cybersecurity Outlook 26. So these figures are really from hundreds of security leaders worldwide. Good. What are people scared of the most at the moment, right? If you look here at the chart on the left side, I mean, not surprisingly, AI vulnerabilities sit right at the top with like 87% expecting that this risk is about to increase. Just behind it, you see cyber-enabled fraud and phishing at roughly 77%, and then supply chain disruption at 65%. So the whole top of this list is really climbing sharply if you also look a bit at the trend over the past few years. On the right side, when leaders look ahead, geopolitically motivated attacks come out on top at 64%, and then disinformation at 49%, also very sharply rising over the past few years. And this kind of gives us the top three for the future that we will talk about today. The geopolitical risk aspect, obviously the AI-driven attacks, and emerging tech like quantum computing. So this is a bit how we structured the session of today. Good. Let's start with the first topic. Geopolitical threats and supply chain, right? The simple message here is that security and geopolitics can no longer be really separated, right? Because an attack today is not just a technical problem anymore, it's more a business and a geopolitical one. Why am I saying this? The chart on the left shows what leaders say matters most when the geopolitical and economic environment shifts. Investing in AI and digital comes out clearly on top here with 38%. After that, improving geopolitical risk management comes at 24%, and localizing or regionalizing operations is at 12%. So the priority here is really about getting smarter and better prepared. On the right side is where the supply chain now comes in, and this is really, I would call it a bit of a pressure point, if you if you will, right? Because our logistics and production are more decentralized or digitized than ever. So if when the software supply chain is getting more and more complex, a single hack at one of these companies can then really hit you all at once. And I think this is also here really the key message, right? If one of those suppliers or the critical supplier goes down, right, it can freeze your entire organization. Let's make this a bit real. Let's look at some examples, right? The header here says it quite well, I would say, right? As digitization speeds up, the cyber risk profile of every industry rises with it. Huh? This timeline shows that a bit, right? If you want to walk across with me here, on the left side with the yellow box, right? From 2017 through 2025, a steady drumbeat of incidents like malware, ransomware, phishing, hacking, all of these things hitting different countries and sectors year after year. So it's not just one bad event. I mean, we all know that, but it's really becoming a pattern. If you focus, as mentioned, on 2017, some of you might remember with NotPetya. There was a malware that spread worldwide and even crippled sensors monitoring radiation levels at the Chernobyl site, right? So it tells you a bit how far the blast radius can actually reach. And notice a bit the more recent ones, 23, 24, 25, and also increasingly about third-party providers. Supplier gets hit, and suddenly your data ends up on the dark web. And that's a bit the shift, right? Your suppliers are now really part of the whole attack surface. If you look a bit, okay, how do we mitigate this risk? I mean, we mentioned here three things. Obviously, there are more than just that, right? But recurring due diligence on your third parties across IT, cyber, people risk, etc. That's obviously one part. Number two, incident response that you have actually rehearsed through realistic tabletop exercises. And I know some of you have heard it for years and years. Adopting a zero trust security model would be a good start. I know, or personally don't know any organization who has this really implemented, especially not over a longer period of time, but it would be a good model to really mitigate this first risk. Now, let's go to the second one, the quantum threat. The key idea, I'm sure you're all aware of here, is harvest now, decrypt later. So attackers are quietly collecting encrypted data today, betting they can unlock it once quantum computers are strong enough. So anything that has to stay confidential for years is kind of already exposed, right? The timeline here, there is a lot of debate about that. I talked to a CEO of a bigger bank today. He said quantum is not coming. I'm like, okay, that's one way to look at it. But the expectation from the experts is that by around 2035 to 2040, quantum computers could be powerful enough to crack today's encryption, right? And we believe it will play out in waves. So state-sponsored attacks usually come first. They have bigger funding. They have better access to the hardware. And then around 2030, 2040, then it continues with the criminals, later with corporate spies, hacktivists, insiders, etc. Right? So the message here really is it doesn't arrive all at once, but it spreads a bit across the timeline. The catch here is a bit at the bottom of the slide, right? Switching to a quantum safe encryption algorithm isn't quick either. If you look on the right side, the history shows that we needed 16 years to come away from triple DES, and it took us 10 years to come away from SHA-1. So even though if the so-called Q-day still feels to be far off, I mean, the clock has kind of already started ticking, and the banks and the governments really need to begin to act now and not when it's too late. Now, if all goes well, the next slide should have a quick video. Let's try to run that.
One morning we wake up and something's off. The Wi-Fi works, the website loads, Our passwords are still there. They're just not ours anymore. Our bank accounts still open for someone else. Our messages already read. The lock we built our digital world around just opened. This isn't the start of a science fiction movie. This is just math finally catching up. And it's not coming decades from now. It's already en route. We call it Q-Day.
Good. So we don't want to just scare people, obviously, because the good news is that there is a clear roadmap. If you look at the timeline here on this slide, right, some of you might recognize it. It has gone around quite often in recent weeks and months. It shows a bit a summary of the deadlines that have been set, for example, by the European Union. They have clear milestones now for 26, 30, and 35. So by the end of 26, every EU member state should have a national roadmap in place and have started pilots for high and medium risk use cases. By 2030, the high risk ones should be fully migrated, and by 2035, the rest should follow as far as feasible, right? And this is not just an EU topic, obviously. In Switzerland, we have moved as well. Some of you might have seen this July, FINMA published its own guidance on quantum computing. It's the FINMA guidance 0526. And they expect as well Swiss banks and insurance companies to have a board-approved roadmap ready by mid-2027. Right, and that the content is very similar. You start with a roadmap, and then you go to building an inventory, see, okay, what do I actually have, what encryption standards are in place, and then you try to, as you go along, to replace them with quantum safe encryption algorithms. The reason a bit why FINMA and others are pushing here is a bit the following gap. Some of you might have seen it. FINMA surveyed 60 Swiss institutions and found that 72% of those hadn't planned or implemented a single quantum safe measure, right? And only 8%, according to that study, have actually a concrete roadmap in place. So for the banks and insurance companies in the room, right, the message is kind of simple. It now maps into supervisory expectations. So from FINMA in Switzerland and for the EU area, it's from a NIS2 and DORA perspective, right? And I know currently it's an Aufsichtsmitteilung from FINMA, but usually they translate into circular then as we go down the timeline. Good. Now let's go into AI-driven attacks, our third topic, and then James will obviously take or do the deep dive here for us. As you are well aware, right, attackers are now using AI to scale, to personalize, and to automate the attacks that they have. And we kind of, as the defenders, we are struggling to keep up with that speed. And I see that very often from a consulting perspective, but also from a client perspective. If you look a bit, if you start on the chart on the left side, right, it shows what worries people the most about Gen AI. And here data leaks are at the top with 30%. This is closely followed by attackers getting more and more capable at 28%. And if you point your attention to the 64% on the bottom left side, that's how many organizations actually have an AI security assessment process in place. I mean, it's like, okay, 64, that's better than nothing, right? But it also shows you that roughly a third are still rolling out AI with no real security check at all. If you go to the right side, this is a bit where it all lands, right? Cybercrime and fraud, if I may summarize it like that. In practice, it means you have fake invoices, you have CO frauds, payment redirection, impersonation. I mean, all of the usual things just amplified by AI. And usually the attacks, at least at the moment, they pay off quite well because crypto and digital assets make the money really hard to trace, so the criminals can kind of cash out fast. If we look at how such an attack can play out, I have an example here. This is a typical attack journey. it's actually a real case here from a multinational firm in Singapore. I think it's dated, March 2025. The company's name was never made public here, but the pattern is exactly what I see here on this slide, right? If you follow a bit the steps here, it starts quite innocently at step 1. A message from the CEO asking the finance director to quickly join a call, right? I mean, it doesn't seem to be too unusual. But then the deepfakes join, right? And by step 3 comes an ask to transfer almost $500,000 to a partner and to keep this transfer confidential. The funny stuff or the interesting stuff here, right, is the whole thing was staged. So everyone on that call was an AI deepfake, everyone. And he was even asked to be put in touch with a lawyer who had him sign an NDA to kind of reinforce that secrecy or that false feeling of that it is an actual real case. So he actually then made the transfer of $500,000. If you look at steps 5, 6, and 7, the money then goes to a mule account, and a day later, then they even got more greedy and asked for another $1.4 million. And that's then the moment where he realized, okay, this is probably a scam, right? In this case, he could alert the bank, and the police could recover the full amount, right? But it shows you a bit how these attack journeys work and that they are quite successful. If you look at, okay, how do we mitigate that? Obviously, training employees and executives on AI-driven social engineering is super key. But then also to enforce phishing-resistant MFAs and least privileged access to prevent account takeover, and also deploy advanced email filtering and anomaly detection to identify AI-generated content. In this content here, not any single mitigation option would have stopped the attack, but the sum of it, would have significantly decreased the likelihood that something happens here. Good. Now I hand over to James. He will guide us through the deep dive.
Thank you,
on
Mark.
AI.
Thank you. And for those that are attending the Global Cyber Conference in a matter of weeks' time, now's the right time to be taking some notes and some homework, because we're going to give you some useful tips, practical tips that we will go through in person in the conference. And what Mark's been describing is the role of AI in enabling cyber criminals. But I want to flip the switch to AI inside the organization. And there's a common phrase of AI for cyber or cyber for AI. And that is the concept of making your security team more efficient through the use of AI, or applying security controls to AI adoption within the organization. And that's where we're really going to focus now. And when I say practical tips, this comes from the experience that EY has working with a number of clients on their AI journeys and what we've observed along the way. So moving from the attack scenario to the adoption challenges, the AI adoption really goes wrong in 3 very connected reasons. The first one is around the accountability being unclear, ownership of risk, approvals, oversight becomes very fragmented. That coupled with, secondarily, security controls and monitoring not keeping pace with the way that AI solutions consume data. And then lastly, the organizations try to scale before they have the governance, architecture, and operational disciplines they need to do it securely. So the objective is not about slowing down AI adoption. It's instead creating the right conditions for a confident and controlled adoption at scale. So moving ahead into kind of the key risks and challenges. AI is not simply another application risk. It multiplies existing exposure across technology, process, and people. So from a technical perspective, we see model vulnerabilities, complex data pipelines, reliance on external AI services. That coupled with, from a process perspective, true AI governance, secure development, risk integration, often being very, very immature in organizations. And then lastly, and arguably one of the most important points, is from a people standpoint, the skills, both the knowledge and how to be able to use and deploy AI in a safe way, but also the fact that uncontrolled shadow AI can bypass otherwise sound controls in an organization. So these three dimensions are reinforcing one another. So secure adoption requires controlled, coordinated response across the full operating model. And maybe just on the next slide to dig a little bit deeper into the technical area, there are already things available to be able to help. But the message is very clear that you need to do so in a very holistic way. So OWASP Top 10 for LLM, a language model application specific view from a threat perspective. So yes, it includes a lot of the things you may have seen and come to expect from OWASP. Things like prompt injection, supply chain risks, data and model poisoning, excessive agency, things like that. The key point here is that when you're taking a look at the AI implementation within an organization, you shouldn't address these risks or try to assess them in isolation. So maybe to give an example, a poisoned knowledge source, it could support prompt injection, influence an agent, and ultimately trigger an unsafe downstream action. There's intersections at play. And therefore, traditional application security controls remain necessary, but they're no longer sufficient on their own. You need to look at this in a more comprehensive manner. And to give a really tangible example on the next slide, we have executed security assessments specific to AI for organizations. These are anonymized findings from some of the reports that we have and assessments that we've delivered. And we have seen in practice outputs may be consumed and executed downstream without sufficient validation. Really, this is about the desire to accelerate the adoption of AI at such pace that the data that is being output from the AI model is being used and trusted implicitly, which creates, of course, some risks to the organization. And furthermore, the knowledge ingestion processes and vector store controls, they may accept untrusted, outdated, malicious, or unauthorized content, meaning that any of the output that you get from your large language model, it can't be trusted from the start because of the sources that have been used to be able to generate that output. And lastly, the fact that a lot of the AI applications and environments that we've observed being very interconnected with external environments and external services, retrieval, API integrations, and other agents that may enter the model can do so without inspection. So again, there's an implicit trust that exists in the data that both goes into the language model and comes out without the right safeguards in place to be able to address them adequately. So we see these in common mistakes to avoid. We see them at the governance level, where AI risks can very much remain disconnected from enterprise risk management without the right level of accountability across the full life cycle. From an architectural perspective, sensitive data can enter AI workflows without consistent classification or protection. And then getting more technical at the control level, validation, filtering, monitoring, secure development practices, they may differ based on use cases. And then when you add on top of that agentic solutions that introduce further concern because of excessive permissions, they can enable actions far beyond the intended scope. So the lesson is that consistency of the approach to managing and mitigating AI risk, consistency from a governance, architecture, and technical controls, it must operate as one system. Clear ownership, minimum requirements, and it covers every AI use case. So how can you do this? How can you take a really practical approach to understanding this within your organization? So on the next slide, we've got a visualization of a kind of step-by-step way that you can consider this. And the practical response is to connect the governance together with the technical execution. And that is, at the very beginning, map your AI use cases, map your data flows, ownership, the most material risks, have an understanding of the environment, measure those risks, define tolerance thresholds as you should in risk management, identify the controls required, and manage them through prioritization, accountable control owners, etc. The typical governance measures that you would expect to see in any security environment. But then as you look from a technical perspective into more managing, implement the guardrails, specific guardrails from an AI standpoint. So whether it's filtering, identity controls, access controls, testing, red teaming, data security reviews, technical controls that are customized for the model that you're using or the environment that you've built and architected, and then connect that together lastly to finish the life cycle with a continuous monitoring capability that is specific for all components of your AI architecture stack. It can and then can identify the anomalies. It can control performance. It's not a one-time compliance exercise. It's a repeatable life cycle that is continuously monitored from a governance perspective, from a controls perspective, and real-time input-output in your AI model. And that, of course, can then be coupled with your broader security monitoring capabilities inside your organization. So another way to look at this is then from a dedicated security assessment of your AI platform. And this is an option because one of the key challenges we noted earlier on is that for many organizations, the desire to adopt AI at breakneck speed is real, but the right skills and capability and capacity to be able to adequately secure it is a challenge. So really, AI security assessments are becoming unavoidable because the operating landscape, the operating reality, the assurance expectations, and the threat landscape, these are all converging, as we heard Mark talk about a little bit earlier on. So organizations need to identify risks that are specific to AI rather than simply reuse a conventional application security checklist. Also, the need for evidence that controls are operating effectively is a way to give your management team who have invested in AI adoption adequate assurance of the security of the investment that's been made. And this is where frameworks such as ISO, NIST, OWASP, they can provide really useful reference points for governance and security. But a well-designed assessment does more than just identify the gaps. It strengthens security compliance, it supports management assurance, it provides a defensible basis for scaling AI in a safe way. And really, a credible assessment follows a structured path from evidence to action. So first, use a consistent set of AI accelerators and artifacts that are really designed to work well in the AI environment which you've built. Apply AI-specific tooling so that the review reflects the actual behavior of the model and the data flows and integrations. And then anchor the assessment in governance and risk rather than just treating it purely as a technical test. And then lastly, and arguably the most important part, is to translate into a very clear target state, prioritize remediation roadmap, and into some executive language so that you can provide the overview to your leadership team and to those who are investing in the future of AI in the organization with a well-informed view. And I wanted to give a very quick view of how can you do this, what's available. So on the next slide, there's a few different artifacts that are available. And from an EY perspective, the way that we've done this is we've developed some of this in-house and some of it we've actually leveraged publicly available resources and taken the best bits of many different frameworks to create these artifacts. But really what it does is it's an integrated set of assets that help rather than just relying on a generic framework. It's about creating something that is specific to the environment that's being assessed. So secure by design methods embeds security throughout the life cycle, the AI life cycle. Privacy and responsible AI frameworks can address the appropriate use and protection of data, depending on what type of data you're using in the environment. If it's connected to your productivity suite, whether it's connected to your ERP or to your customer relations databases, etc., you can really tailor the framework around what data is being used in the environment. And then control matrices, workbooks can make the expectations accessible and traceable. Governance model that can help really to flex the governance of the AI solution to the environment and indeed your organization, noting that many organizations don't have a dedicated AI capability, let alone AI security capability. So therefore, we see a lot of different structures of governance in many organizations, and getting the right governance for your organization is key. There's some good frameworks out there to use as a starting point, but of course they need to be tailored. And maybe on the next slide, I just want to dig a little bit deeper into one of the examples, which is the secure by design methodology. This is a really important one because as security practitioners, we know for many years we've been talking about shifting left and building security in much earlier. This is, for me, arguably one of the most important artifacts that you can have when you are looking to support the security of an AI system and indeed an assessment of that. It's about introducing decisions early, carrying them through the entire AI lifecycle. Starts at the ideation and design, through build and deployment, and remains active during operations. These reference architectures, they standardize proven protection mechanisms. So each team doesn't have the standards, have to solve the same security challenges over and over again. Can build in regulatory compliance requirements from day one, and also integrate your security capabilities that you have in the rest of your environment. This is something that I would really encourage you to take a look at in your organization, is how can you build a secure by design methodology that is specific for your environment, both from an AI standpoint and also from a wider enterprise standpoint as well. But I'd also be remiss to not concede that the way that you do an assessment has indeed changed. EY has done many, many assessments of security across many years, many clients, many jurisdictions. And even for us, the way that we assess AI has to change, recognizing the dynamic nature of AI. No longer can you rely on a interview and paper-based evidencing of a particular set of controls from an assurance perspective. Yes, we still do leverage in the way that we do it, expert-led interviews, workshops, evidence gathering, etc., to understand the governance and accountability and process maturity side of things. But really the hybrid nature of an AI assessment is here. And that is blending together the very traditional interview and paper-based assessments into a more accelerated technical activity. So integrating tools into environment that can grab the right evidence across the environment tailored to that specific model or infrastructure, technical validation in terms of the control, and of course, if necessary, going to the level of doing control testing, and even red teaming, purple teaming as necessary. And this being having this done in a sequential manner, so that it recognizes that an AI model, how it behaves static versus in use and dynamic, is also something that needs to be factored in. So the result of this is that you are balancing also a human judgment of exercising a assessment in a very standard normalized way, but also leveraging automation and the technical validation from tools. This can help to give a very comprehensive assessment that enables you to look at the AI adoption or the security of the AI platform from a number of different lenses. So just a little deep dive of how you can think about some of these AI adoption challenges, ways that you can practically assess it, understand it, and take some action inside your organization. And as I mentioned, we will do a deeper dive of a hands-on example in the conference in a couple of weeks' time. But in summary, Mark, if you want to jump us over to the takeaways, of course, there's a couple from an AI perspective. We all recognize that the speed of AI is fast. We need to be faster. And therefore, what we're providing is a view that security can still work in an AI-enabled environment. It just needs to be as dynamic as AI is. Be creative in how you solve some of these challenges. And also, to kind of further that, is that not using AI to accelerate your work is putting you at a disadvantage. So do so. Leverage it from a defense perspective, leverage it from an assurance perspective. It is there. It serves a valuable purpose. Don't be afraid of it and shy away. Engage with it. There are a lot of really great AI-enabled security use cases. But the one thing, if it hasn't always been the case for many of you, it certainly is now, security being a continuous assurance activity, continuously validating the way that the controls are operating, particularly from an AI perspective, they're being monitored on a frequent, regular basis. Has never been more important than it is today.
Thank you very much, James. And I think to end the slide here on 4 to 6, right? As I have mentioned in the slides before, right? People, as always in cyber, right? People are the foundation of a firm's cyber resilience, right? So you need to train employees. You need to have your executives trained really on the new AI-driven social engineering threats that are out there, right? Some people detect deepfake, but it's only getting better and better, right? So you really need that human defense layer. Number 5, managing third-party risks is even more crucial than it has been before to really secure your operations and sustain continuity. We've seen that, right? If one of your third parties gets hacked, it is also really bad for you. And then, of course, number 6, evaluate and allocate resources according to your risk appetite. Here we see really a spread. Some companies are already quite advanced. They really push the agenda forward. They have budget allocated for it. And others are still in very early stages, right? But I think here we all know in what direction the business is going, be it from a capability enabling perspective or from a cost reduction perspective. AI is here to stay. And as Elon Musk said when they asked him, is AI good or is it bad? And he said, 80% likelihood that AI is good and improves all of our lives, and like 20% that it is the opposite. But we, of course, hope that we stay within these 80%. Good. That's the end of the presentation. Then I hand back to Samir, I think, who manages our Q&A session.
Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you very much, James. Maybe you can stop. Okay, you stopped the presentation. It was great to listen to you. Really very different perspectives and a lot of eye-opener points. We will have around 10 minutes for the questions. I have already received a couple of really nice, a little bit challenging questions. Are you ready for that?
Fire away.
Let's do so. So first question is about these silos. So you have shown that 78% of the organization are expecting right now a lot of AI threats. And also in the slides, you show that the formal AI tool security assessment process is still far from the universal. Where does the gap comes from right now? It's from the skills, it's from the ownership or the budget or proper governance. Where do you see the real gap right now?
I think it's a little bit of all, but the one thing that we see most in the clients that we work with in some of their challenges in the adoption is that the speed and pace that is being demanded from the leadership team in terms of adopting AI far outpaces the ability to be able to secure it and assure it adequately. So we see a number of organizations that, from a governance perspective and from a controls perspective, they are ready. They have the knowledge and the skills to be able to implement this. But whereas previously they may have had months to do it, they're being asked to do so in weeks or days. That's where some of the challenges may arise. Conversely, the skills, I will absolutely reinforce that the skills side of things, let me be clear that you do not need to be an AI security expert in order to adequately secure AI, because a lot about the AI usage is about data flows, it's about networking, it's about storage and infrastructure and encryption, all of these considerations that as security practitioners we've known for a number of years. And really, if you get to the level of very specific model technical controls, that is where it's often, and we see organizations looking for external support rather than trying to teach their internal teams to become data scientists, because that doesn't happen overnight either.
Yes, if you say kind of internal team, external team, and we know that many mid-sized service organizations, they don't have dedicated security team, or even if you call AI security team, what are the first 3 controls that give the most protection for those less efforts for those companies? specifically?
It's an interesting question, and I would be remiss to answer it in a very blunt way, because ultimately one thing I would convey is it's use case specific. And this is where I would really encourage, if you're looking at what are the minimum 3 things that I should do to secure AI, take a step back before you ask that question to say, how is AI being used?
Yes.
That to me is the biggest framing, because then you have an understanding of where the data is coming in, where the data is going out, and what the data is that you're talking about. Those things should really guide the controls, because I've seen organizations that one of their biggest concerns is actually jurisdictionally, they want to make sure that their data stays within North America or within Europe, for example. Having an understanding of what data it is, where's it coming from, and where's it going, that enables you to say, okay, what kind of controls do I need to implement? Is it at the network layer? Is it at the application or at the data layer? It really depends on that use case. So that would be my question back, is understand your use cases first and foremost, but really do look at it in those kind of 3 paradigms of data in, data processed, data out. Try and apply one control in each part of that life cycle. Because that way you're ensuring that foundationally you've got a level of confidence right the way from start to finish of the AI lifecycle.
James, you just gave a very good explanation of the process, all the controls, but many organizations also, they have a shadow AI problem, and you have also listed on your slides as one of the key risks. If you talk about a shadow AI, what are the most realistic first move? Like block it, discover it, govern it, because again, employees, they use it and they might have uncontrolled process for the data. What's
Absolutely.
the
I think it really comes down to the culture of the organization and how compliance regulatory driven they are versus how risk adverse they are. I've seen organizations that simply, if it's not permitted and it's not been through all the approved processes, it is simply blocked. And employees cannot access it through browsers. They cannot install the devices on their desktops. They complete, blackout against those certain tools. Other organizations take a slightly different view, where the minute that security starts to introduce friction in productivity, that can actually risk slowing the business down. That is a bigger concern than using unsanctioned AI tools. And so they choose the other end of the spectrum, which is let's identify it and govern it. And let's get a level of control around, but understanding the use case, and let's engage with it constructively rather than taking a very kind of black and white approach of just straight up blocking it. So it really comes down to the culture of the organization.
That might be easy to do it in a mid-sized organization or SMEs, and the companies like global organization like EY. Have thousands of employees from different geographies, different backgrounds in the regions. How do you control it actually at EY? Do you have any best practice? Maybe you have.
I mean, so what we actually do in EY is kind of a hybrid approach of what I've just described. So actually, even on our own devices, if we try to access unsanctioned AI tools, it's straight up blocked. We can't get there. But at the same time, the broadness of the availability of tools that we can use that have been through the official processes and are already sanctioned and supported, it's a pretty considerable list, and it's constantly kept up to date. So even as new models are launched by various providers, very quickly, EY security team does what it needs to do to gain the right levels of assurance, because they understand that productivity is a key benefit for our organization. And therefore, the quicker they can enable it to be done securely, the better the outcome for the organization. So we do a little bit of both.
Okay. And I have another. Yeah, please, Mark, go ahead.
To add to that, maybe, right? I mean, I think this is super key, right? You have to offer your employees a safe or a sanctioned AI alternative or a solution, right? Because they are going to use it anyway. So if you just block and say you can't use it, or if there is no guidance, they just do it anyway. They use a solution that has not been blocked, but they move it somewhere else, right? Because the productivity gains are so high that you are kind of forced into doing that, right? And as said here by James before, right? The really first move in almost all of these cases, okay, to have an overview, what is being used, right? Where is the data?
Saying that, Mark and James, I have very good questions that is following your explanation. What are the best technology tools that companies are currently using to introduce AI governance internally and it's changing the culture? Changing the culture is the
I mean,
hardest.
it's a very interesting
People
question.
start
Thank you for the
to-
question. I mean, look, I will say from from an EY perspective, we are technology agnostic. We work with a number of different vendors in this space. There are some excellent tools that provide different capabilities. My advice to you would be consult some of the well-known research organizations, such as Forrester's, Gartner's, etc. They have leadership boards specifically for this space. You can see what technologies are out there, what's available. But also, I would make sure you understand and tailor your expectations to what you want the tool to do and what the reality may be of what the tool can do. Something when I hear the phrase culture, having a tool be able to enable a culture change, sure. But there's a lot of extra stuff that's going to have to exist on top of a tool to be able to help drive a culture. And I would say one of the struggles that you have in your organization is to stand up an AI governance function and get people to buy into it and really engage with it and on board with it. A tool is a good place to get started to formalize it. But really, where I would be focusing a bit more of the attention is driving that internal sales pitch of focusing in your key stakeholders who should care about AI security. That would be it your legal team, your privacy team, your compliance team, whoever it might be, even down to your finance team that have got to look after the token spend. Engage with them proactively to get them to buy in. The tooling will then, of course, grow that and scale it and formalize it. But make sure that as you're embarking on that journey, and I wish you luck in doing so, but make sure you're approaching it with a realistic expectation on the tool will be there to serve a certain purpose, and it will. There's a lot that you'll still have to do sitting outside the tool, I'm afraid.
James, Mark, do you have any feedback for this question, or shall I move to next?
I mean, on the tooling perspective, I mean, maybe one tool, I mean, we can name is like obviously Microsoft Purview that is used by a lot of organizations just because they are in the M365 environment, right? And I mean, with Purview, you can discover AI usage, you can control data classification, policy enforcement, right? All of that stuff, and you can actually use the Copilot dashboard to understand the adoption and usage patterns of the users, right? To see what tokens are being spent, right? So this is for many organizations a rather pragmatic approach to it, right? Just because you already have, or many already have, the M365 platform in use, right?
Perfect. James, you just mentioned like different stakeholders embedding the culture, and we have another question regarding the board. Do you think that the board should involve the AI governance process from your perspective and from your experience? Do you see the board really is interested in AI governance? Is it in their agenda?
AI is in their agenda. Is the AI governance in their agenda? No. I think be very clear in terms of a board of directors or even an executive board level. They are operating purely at this high level, 50,000-foot strategic perspective. How things are done, that's not their detail. That's not what they want to know about. What boardrooms around the world have got AI as a topic because they want to realize the gains that AI brings. And that is about enabling their staff to be faster, better, smarter, more efficient, etc. That's really where their focus is. And so ensuring that as you are, from a security perspective, working to secure AI, make sure you're framing the work that you do up to your leadership, up to the executive board, in a way that describes how you're enabling that to be the case. And you're supporting that journey to happen in a safe way. Make sure you frame that journey in their language and their expectations. That will then really be able to support your cause as a security practitioner to say, it's not that we need to not do this. We need to do this thing because by doing this, we're going to be enabled to do X, Y, and Z. That's really about turning it into a positive story that the board will really buy into because it's aligned with what they want to get out of AI. So frame it correctly.
Yeah, cool. The other question regarding it's about cyber threat actors from EY's perspective. What's the current state of state-sponsored cyber threats and attacks targeting Switzerland, and what the trends are you currently monitoring from EY perspective?
Mark, do you want to take that one?
Mark, yes.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I don't have all the information regarding that, right? I mean, we see globally, I would say, significant state-sponsored cyber activity, right? Very often you don't see it end to end because the states are inside your company sometimes for months and years, collecting data, carefully extracting it, right? In the end, it ends up somewhere in China or in another country. And then the Swiss company is like, okay, how do they have our IP? Or they don't even recognize it, right? They don't just see, okay, they for some reason copied our products, right? So I don't have a clear answer on that because unlike other espionage or like threat vectors, you don't have a destructive attack. You don't really see it, right? But my concern here really is that they collect intelligence, they steal sensitive information, and they have resources at hand that companies and individuals don't have, right? And they have all the time in the world. If they want something from you, it's quite hard to protect your company from it.
Thanks a lot, Mark. I would like to ask kind of last question because we are coming to the end of our session. We talk about AI, we talk about cyber, and when it comes to post-quantum cryptography, for example, if the board asks you to start now, what does the credible first year will look like on your agenda? What you have to do starting from now for the next 12 months?
It's an interesting question, Samir, and I've worked recently with a client who's asked exactly that same question. How do we get started? And really what I observed was that one of their internal compliance team did their own research. They're not a quantum expert. They did their own research and wrote a paper internally on what should they do? What are the risks? Why do they even need to care about this? And they actually did a very, very good job of pulling together a number of just freely open resources into a position paper that shows how to get started with this. We need to assess it. We need to assess inside this organization, where are we at risk? What risks are we trying to treat? And how can we do that? And a couple of the things you can practically do to get started is, a cryptographic bill of materials, a quantum bill of materials. There are a few things. It's about assessing the landscape and where this will be a problem, but also applying traditional infrastructure and architecture controls often can now reduce risks, even though the kind of what happens on Q day and what the aftermath looks like in terms of encryption algorithms, we don't know that, and we won't likely know that for some time. You're building preventative compensating controls already today. So if you know you've got an algorithm that is encrypting data that is critical, keep it under several layers, defense in depth, so that at the point in time that encryption algorithm may be broken, the risk of it being exposed has been mitigated in advance.
Yeah. Mark?
Yeah, so I said, right, you can really focus on visibility. So first, build your cryptographic inventory so that you know where your most sensitive data lives, right? And then establish a board-approved roadmap. This is basically how I would start. This is also aligned with what FINMA expects, right? Because it's very similar. You need to have the visibility. You need to know how you encrypt your data with what encryption standards so that you can start replacing those standards, or at least go with a hybrid approach, meaning you encrypt with your existing plus the new quantum resistant algorithm.
If I go one step back, do you think that a quantum literacy is also important for the boards, for organizations, for management, for owners, risk owners, to understand what's actually quantum is? From my perspective, not everyone understands what's quantum, what can happen, what's really this Q day, what can it brings to them, like a disaster.
From my perspective, right, you don't have to understand how it actually works. We have some quantum physicists at EY, not even they fully understand how it works, right? I would say for most people, you need to understand the implications and that existing cryptographic standards become deprecated and that you have to replace it with quantum resistant standards. The perception on the board level, that really depends on sometimes the belief or the interest people have in it, right? As said, I just had a discussion a few hours ago where they said quantum is not coming because we don't know in the end, right? It's still vague. Also, the timeline is vague. But if you look back in history, encryption standards is just a question of time. And a lot of these activities are good hygiene anyway, that you know where your data is and how to encrypt it.
Yes. I still have a lot of questions, but I think we will see each other in almost 10 days at the Dolder Grant. I would like really thank you to both of you for insightful information, practical information, that we keep it less theoretical, more practical, and I believe it was very interesting also for our audience. And what if I can summarize, please correct me if I'm wrong, this one of our workshops that we did right now, the speed matters more than perfection, that we have to really start as soon as possible with the team, with developer, with the board, and AI risk isn't one more application risk. It is multiples across the data, identity, software, operations. So control is important that you just mentioned, James, and we have to keep two things in our mind, always our people and third-party risks, if I can summarize. But the rest, I believe we will have plenty of time during 1st and 2nd of September to go first through with your roundtable, which is risk board, assessing the AI quantum geopolitical risks. Then 1st September evening, we have Swiss Awards ceremony, which is presented by EY, and we are very happy to present the awards to the selected winners. That this year we have Services of the Year and the Future Leader categories. Saying that, I would like to thank to Mark and James. Thank you also to EY Switzerland for your partnership. Thank you all of our attendees that you spent your time today. You will get slides and recordings from us very soon. We will be sending the also very short feedback form to you, that if you have further questions, if you have any further feedback or comment, you can write us back anytime. And now I finish my side to say thank you. I want to give the stage last time to James and Mark, and then close it.
Thank you, Samir. I think you summarized it perfectly. The one thing that I would say is speed, not perfection. So I totally agree. And thank you, everyone, for attending. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you, James, and everyone. Have a lovely afternoon.
Thank you all.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
Bye.